Hi, good evening, everyone. And today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, that is how to become a speech language pathologist. And we have a professional with us. Her name is Jessica J. Bonner Gomez, and she is going to tell us on how she herself became a speech language pathologist. And she's going to introduce her to us all and give us a brief understanding on the whole subject area or on how to become a speech pathologist. Jessica, could you tell us a little bit about yourself before we begin the session?
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jessica Bonner Gomez, and I am a speech language pathologist, specifically a school speech language pathologist who resides in Birmingham, Alabama, USA. And so I have been a school speech language pathologist for about 2 years now. I'm still kind of considered fairly new. But more about myself, born and raised in Alabama, in the central Alabama area, have been here all my life. I went on to college, and firstly, I started off with an English major background. So I completed the first bachelor's degree. It was English and Communication Studies, double major, with a writing minor. And then I went on and earned a master's in English with a concentration in rhetoric and composition, because at that time I thought that I wanted to be an English teacher. And so after having taught English composition to college freshmen and some sophomores for about 3.5 years, I decided that route was not for me. And I started to look for other opportunities, something that was education related, but that would definitely help my population. And that was how I came across speech language pathology. I went on to earn a second bachelor's degree in communication science and disorders, which is the umbrella field for speech language pathology. And so the second bachelor's program took me about a couple of years. And so that was to increase my chances of getting into graduate school for speech language pathology, which is actually a very competitive field to get into. I mean, it's possible, but it's still competitive. So having a bachelor's in communication science disorders increases students' chances of being admitted to a master's in speech language pathology. So I just finished that last program in December 2019. So as of today, I do have 4 degrees, two English based and two speech language pathology based. I run For the Prizes Consulting, and I've been running it since 2016. It is my tutoring, editing, and exam prep coaching business. And so my focus areas include English, reading, math up until pre-calculus, as well as ACT prep, SAT, GRE, GED, ASVAB, and Praxis. So I have been, again, about almost 6 years now doing For the Prizes Consulting. And as I said before, I do work in the school. Specifically, I am an elementary school speech language pathologist, working with kids normally ages 3 to 11 years old. And so that is a joy to work with those individuals in this field. I learn from them, we learn from each other, and it's overall good fun working with that population.
It's really great to know, Jessica. Now it's time for us to move on to the main session. So let us talk about what interested you to take up speech language pathology as a career.
Yes, so I was transitioning out of the English field, and I determined at that point I do not want to do teaching anymore. I knew at one point I was leaning toward potentially going into counseling, and I was taking a couple of classes in the summer some years back, maybe 2012, and I had to take one called Exceptional Learners. Yeah, I think it was called Exceptional Learners, and so I had an opportunity to go off campus and volunteer at a local summer camp, and it was specifically for young adults who had different type of disabilities. For instance, autism, Down syndrome, it was a cerebral palsy. So they had all of these types of conditions, and I got to engage with each of these individuals while volunteering at this summer camp, and I actually loved it. And I thought to myself, wow, this is amazing. This population is amazing, because though I had seen these individuals when I was in school coming up back in elementary school days and high school days, I had not really engaged with this population, nor did I know how to. But when I had this opportunity to engage with this population, I was amazed and fascinated. I loved working with them, being around them. And I thought to myself, I really want to go into a field that helps this particular population. So I started looking around. I found the special education field, but I told myself I knew I wanted to do something a little different. Special education, it tends to that population all the time. But I was thinking like, what is something, a field that I can kind of marry my skills from the past. I was an English major, and I did a lot of writing, a lot of educating, a lot of teaching. What can I do and combine that with special education to best serve my population? And that was how I came upon speech language pathology, and I was very excited to learn about it after looking through it and the courses and things that are offered. I told myself this is the field I want to go into.
Superb, Jessica. It's very inspirational. Moving on to the opportunities in the field as a speech therapist, could you tell us a few fields, job opportunities in this field?
Yes, so actually, jobs are plentiful in this field because that's one of the things I also loved about it going into this field was the job security. And I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. So, as I did mention before, the school system, that is an area that is always looking for speech therapists, especially those school districts where you would consider them in the lower income, neighborhoods, right? They they seem to be the ones that need them the most, because some speech therapists, they, at first they kind of flock off to the areas that are, they are more wealthy in those areas. And so those spots get taken up fairly quickly. But in those less wealthy neighborhoods, you have a plenty opportunity to be a speech therapist in that area. And that includes, elementary schools like primary school. You can do, before primary school, there is what they call what they call the early years. And so that is before 3 years old when they do that. And so you have that, you have primary years, you have middle school years, that's around 12 to 14 years old, 12, 13. And then you go on to high school years. So that is a area that where speech therapists are always sought. Also, you have hospitals. Speech therapists have to help patients who are, for instance, they've had a stroke and they have to assess them because sometimes people who have had strokes, they're unable to speak, because the stroke would have affected them in a portion of the brain that affects speech. And so there's different lobes in our brains. And then there are two in particular that helps us with comprehension and it helps us with speech. And so if all of those lobes are affected, then it can be difficult to not only speak, but to comprehend what someone else is saying. So speech therapists are there to assess the situation after an individual has had a stroke, to lay out a plan to, however the best assist that person, either if it's with comprehension, it's with speaking, or it's a combination of the two. Also, they help with swallowing. So we, like when I first came into the field, I was very surprised, like swallowing, that's a part of the field? Yes. So, and this is more so prominent in the hospitals. If you're a speech therapist in the hospital, you're going to be doing a lot with that because there are mechanisms in our throat that help us to swallow. And sometimes maybe due to you may have been in a severe car accident, some severe traumatizing accident that may have messed up your throat, that throat area very badly. A stroke could also do it. And some people are just born with issues with those mechanisms within our throat that helps us just to simply swallow. And it's amazing, how for us every day we could take that for granted. But the speech therapist comes in and assesses that situation as well and provides suggestions for helping the individual to get through that time, to better facilitate swallowing for them. And so if you're interested in a hospital setting, that is definitely an option, though I wouldn't say there are as many jobs for hospital setting as there are for the schools. And then for the next field I'm going to talk about, which is called skilled nursing facility. Some people just call them nursing homes, except nursing homes that have that component where you have your physical therapist, you have your speech therapist, and you have your occupational therapist to kind of help those residents at that facility to keep their mobility, to just to base overall remain functional. Because like I had to do some experience at the nursing home, the skilled nursing facility back when I was in graduate school. It was not my favorite area. I have to admit that it was not my favorite for me personally, because just you had some elderly individuals there, some had dementia, and just to see them not kind of know their surroundings and what was going on and happening around them. For me personally, it was just something that was kind of heartbreaking. But there are individuals who do serve that population, and even though that's something that they may be dealing with, the speech therapist still comes and tries to do things like memory activities with those individuals to kind of retain as much of their memory as possible as what is remaining. And of course, there are individuals in the nursing home who do not have the memory issues at all. They're just in there because they are being rehabilitated for whatever reason. Maybe they had a recent fall at some point, maybe they hurt their hip, and they're just in the skilled nursing facility for a temporary time period, or maybe they've had a stroke and they're in there for that time period, however long they need to be there before they're sent off home. And in that case, the speech therapist will come and, again, like in the hospital case, work on a plan to better facilitate communication for them or comprehension for him, whichever is the issue. And also speech therapists in the nursing, skilled nursing facilities help with the swallowing aspect as well, because feeding is a huge part of just living in a nursing home, and you have to be able to eat the right foods so that you're functioning properly and you're healthy and you're overall well. So those are the three top areas that speech therapists have as opportunities.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for explaining about the different opportunities in this field. Now, could you tell me about the undergraduate and postgraduate courses to take up if students are interested in speech language pathology?
Yes. So one course that is normally, and this is also a good course to take when people are just trying to decide if they're going into that field at all for undergraduate, is introduction to, is some people might, the course might be called Introduction to Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences, or it might be Introduction to Communication and Science Disorders. Mine was the latter. So that was what that course was called. It gives you the overall just overview of that field. And when it's talking about communication science disorders, not only does that deal with things related to speech, it also deals with things related to audiology, your hearing, your ability to hear, because that is the field where people decide by the time they graduate if they want to either be a speech language pathologist or they either want to be an audiologist. So you have your options there, and that is an undergraduate class you would take. Remember another undergraduate course I had to take was phonetics. And so that is just the way it's like the phonetic alphabet is covered. And so if you know about the phonetic alphabet, it's like when we learn how to pronounce words, and we may look in the dictionary and we'll see those little inscriptions written next to it, and it tells us how to shape the vowel, right, to be able to say it. Well, the IPA, an International Phonetic Alphabet, it goes a step deeper, and there are literally all these little symbols that we have to memorize. And so when we are doing when we're trying to detect speech errors, and someone has an articulation disorder, we're trying to detect speech errors, we have to know that alphabet so we can write it out as someone is saying certain words. And so obviously, if there is some type of disorder, we will write out the symbol that corresponds with the sound that's being said, and we can determine from that if this person is dealing with a true articulation disorder and how we can help that individual. So that was one of my favorite classes in undergraduate. Then there's speech science. That is more so, I remember just having to go to the computer lab, and we were talking to the microphone, and they'll show these waves, because apparently, you think about music and how, if you ever look at, I forget what those things called, but you know what I'm talking about. You're playing the music and you'll see the little bar spiking up and down based on the tempo. But it's the same thing with your speaking. And so we had to learn everything by hertz, pitch, all those type things when we were taking the speech science course. It was a more challenging course, but it was one that was very important, one that could be of great benefit to students in that field. Now, those are the big, like more so important undergrad courses. And of course, there are so many others, I could not name them all, but of course, you do have classes that are related to the different areas of speech language pathology and communication and science disorders. Like, you have audiology, the oral rehabilitation class was one I had to take. You have language class, related to development. You have intercultural communication class. You have all of those type of courses that you're taking. For the graduate courses, you're definitely going to go in taking research methods. I know I had to go in the first semester taking research methods. And for me, because I had been prepared in my prior bachelor's program with research. I came in and I passed that with flying colors, with no problem. And so you have that, and pretty much the other areas I mentioned for undergraduate, like language and articulation. You have courses like that as well, but they're on a bigger scale. There's more specific. Like we're talking about specific language disorders. We're breaking that down, and when we're doing our presentations, we're probably doing group presentations and covering a specific language disorder, including causes, age groups, populations, treatments, all of those things that we're covering when we're in graduate school. Then we also we don't necessarily cover audiology anymore in speech language pathology, because once you go in that graduate route for speech language pathology, the audiology is not our focus anymore. It is speech language pathology and solely that. So I do also remember we had to do classes specific, like what is it, communications, what is it, I think it was neurological. I think we had a whole class, I forget what the name of that one is called, but it was specific about how, like, for instance, if you had an event in your brain like a stroke, how that would impact you, the different types of strokes that people can have, the different types of things that can lead up to a stroke. We talk about traumatic brain injury, which can occur from car crashes, for instance, and how people have to rehabilitate themselves. And of course, a big aspect of graduate school is the clinicals you have to go through. So we had to first start off doing clinicals the at the university itself, because they had an on-campus clinic, and we worked with real people who came to our clinic from different parts of Alabama. And I did have to work, for instance, with a traumatic brain injury individual. I think he had been in an accident from bike riding, maybe had been hit by a car some years prior. So he had a lot of issue with comprehension, because it impacted the portion of his brain that affected his comprehension. So we had to work on several exercises with that. I had someone who'd had a stroke before, and I had also had several kids who had articulation concerns or language concerns that I worked with as well. So that was definitely our graduates courses, main graduate courses to look at. Okay, so for then the colleges, I would say there's some that I've heard of more so recently. Now, I know I went to just colleges in Alabama, because this is where I live, and for me personally, it was just convenient to attend the college. But I know we have some colleges in Alabama, like the University of South Alabama. We have the University of Alabama. Um, we have Auburn University, and then I know kind of throughout the country in other states. I know one of the top universities is California State University in Northridge, one of the top ones for speech language pathology. Apparently, people are really trying to get into that one, highly competitive to enter that school. Also, I'm thinking about Baylor University, which is out of Texas, USA. That is another very popular speech language pathology program that's offered there, and as well as New York University. That has a very prominent speech language pathology program that people they want to learn more about, and they want to do everything they can to be able to get in, because it's highly competitive. Oh, and yes, one of the top universities in the country, Northwestern University, one of the top, and that is on the east coast of the United States. I forget exactly which state, but on the east coast of the United States, one of the most prominent universities in the country. So if you're talking about some top universities you want to look at, you definitely want to look at those. But as far as being or finding more colleges to look at, if you just kind of want to look at colleges, maybe they're not the highest of the high, right? And you just want to look at colleges in general, I highly recommend doing a online search for colleges offering speech language pathology, master's programs, specifically master's programs, not just undergraduate programs. And then researching those schools, reaching out to those departments, seeing if you can get an interview in with maybe a faculty member on staff there, if the chair of the department, if you can, and see if you can get some questions answered, or even the graduate admissions department as well at that particular university. They can answer a load of questions for you if you wanted to do that. So one of the things that's really big about getting into these schools is you have to have those letter of recommendations. So you normally have prior professors, prior instructors who will write letters of recommendations for you, namely speaking about your strengths that will make you a great candidate for whatever program that you're applying for. So that is huge on the list for admission to these programs. Now, I know in the United States over this last year, since the coronavirus pandemic started, they have started to waive the testing requirement. Now, I know some schools didn't never did waive that requirement, but some did. So if you're a person who, for instance, standardized exams, like, oh, okay, maybe I do not want to tackle that, and I want to look at universities do not require it. I highly recommend doing an online search and look specifically for speech language pathology graduate programs with no GRE requirement, because the graduate record exam is the exam that normally several of these programs require for students to be admitted. So if you are looking to get into a school but not have to be required to take the exam, do an online search specifically for schools that do not require that. If you do not mind, then of course you can expect that you need to have the GRE score. A lot of times they're averaging their minimum on average is a 300. And if you know about the GRE, the top score you can make is a 340. So on average, a lot of these universities require a 300 minimum, but it could be higher or lower depending on that particular university. And of course, your GPA, right? Your grades are matter a lot too when you are being admitted to a school. Then you have interview and you have your resume if they look at that, and if it's weighed heavily at that university, they'll let you know. So those are main things to keep in mind when you're trying to get into one of these programs.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for explaining about the different courses and the top colleges in the US offering the speech pathology courses. I know you already talked about why you love this field a lot, but could you shed some more light on what is the most interesting thing about this field, or why do you love working as a speech therapist?
Yes, I love working with, especially with the population that I have, because like they say, kids could say the funniest things. That is so true. It's getting to know the kids. The different children that I'm working with is getting to know them, forming a bond with them, a relationship with them. And like I said before, not only am I working to help them to get better at something, or not only am I teaching them something, they're always teaching me something. I'm always learning something, especially if it's concerning their disorder. I can go back to the drawing board and I can say to myself, what is a better way that I can serve this child? Because I want my kids that I work with to excel and be successful. So I love that we already have that bond and that relationship, and that a lot of them actually love coming to me. So that's a great feeling to know, like, okay, yes, even though I'm making them, get this work done while doing speech therapy with me, a lot of them do enjoy coming to me, working with me and actually getting better. And it's the other part of that I love working is watching their progress. There's this one fella I'm working with right now, and he's one of my older elementary school kids, and he has an articulation disorder that some of his words do not come out as clearly when he speaks them. But then I have this one game that he loves to play, or I find a few games that he loves to play, and he is so motivated just because he wants to play the game. He will say the word, and I require him to say each word 5 times. Like, you have to say it 5 times before you could take your turn now. And he would do it every time. But watching his improvement is amazing. Like, oh my goodness, he has improved so much from when I started working with him this school year. And just seeing that improvement just warms my heart, and seeing his motivation and his drive to go ahead and just do what needs to be done. And I know it's a lot of it has to do with him wanting to play the game, but still, he's still driven. He'll do the work so he can do what he wants to do, but in the process, he's improving. So seeing those children improve over time is one of the most heartwarming experiences for me. So I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Thank you so much, Jessica.